Hello, friends. Stephen Manning here from Integrity Ireland. I'll just give it the initial few seconds to get going. And today, as you'll see here in a moment, friends, let's see. The title is Politics and the Great Lie, Understanding Organized, Systemized Evil, and Who to Vote For in the Upcoming Local and EU Elections. And this specifically is to do with Ireland, friends, but I think if you're from another location and you listen to the presentation, I think you're going to pick up hopefully some useful understandings and tips that affect politics all around the world, guys. It affects all of us, of course. Now, excuse me. So please bear with me as I pick the slides, because the slides are coming from a slightly larger presentation and I want to make sure that I do them. I have to write down the order. So here we go, guys. Right. So as you can see here, the Great Lie. Now, what is the Great Lie? Well, very simply, the book I wrote, which I'll just pull up the icon here for a second, top right, Crisis, Cull or Coup, What, How and Who, Facts and Truths to Make You Think. It came on the back of the COVID phenomenon, but basically it's using the COVID phenomenon to explain to people how evil has become systemized, corporatized, governmentalized, institutionalized, without our knowledge, and in many cases, sadly, with our active participation, without us knowing what it is we're involved in. And much of the work that we do now is focused on this general educational theme to try and get people to understand the bigger picture. It's obviously important to deal with the issues, the discrete different issues that we're facing on a day-to-day basis, but there are better and worse ways of dealing with them. And the more of a grasp that an individual has of the bigger picture, the more likely they are to come up with solutions that will genuinely address the source of the problem and not just the symptoms of the problems and the abuses that we're all suffering. So the Great Lie, number one, this is one of, I think it's 48 short bullet points like this in the Crisis, Cull or Coup book, pages 113, 114. And it's a large part of the book is concerned with explaining how and why this Great Lie exists and why we're largely unaware of it. Although I'm glad to say it does seem that a lot of people are starting to wake up over the last few years. And I'm encouraged, for example, to hear prominent voices like, for example, Russell Brand, or the Scottish commentator. Oh, how can I forget his name like this? But it'll come to me in a moment, guys. But a lot of prominent non-mainstream media popular commentators are starting to speak on themes that resonate around the sense that there is a cabal of, let's call them ill-intentioned people, people who do not have our best interests at heart, who are angling to literally control the world. And that it's the system itself, the very system that we've all been indoctrinated and conditioned and born into and conditioned to accept as, well, that's just life, isn't it? It's that very system. Once you start to understand it, you realize that that system has to go. It has to be replaced by something else. I'm arguing not so much a system, but a collaboration, a network, if you like, of genuine small democratic communities. And we'll get into a little bit on that in today's presentation before we go into the individual personalities, some of them who are running for office in Ireland and in the European Union next week. So the Great Lie, number one, that governments work for the people. Let's have a look at the little the bits and pieces I've put in here. Here we have our wonderful cabinet appointments. And this was when I say the previous government, Simon Harris is now the new Taoiseach, coronated, as we've said in a previous video. But they're bottom right. The icon there, which is not so clear, guys, I'll pull it up on the next slide. Some of the personalities on the left, most notably people like Roderick O'Gorman and Stephen Donnelly, for example, Simon Coveney. I mean, these people are literally career liars. They are, there's, if you separate the world into two general groupings, even as I heard Donald Trump say actually in an interview when he was younger the other day, he said that there are two types of people. There are people with a killer instinct, and then there's the sort of the victims. Now, obviously, he was talking in business terms, and the requirement, of course, to have that killer instinct in business to be, quote, successful. But largely, this is what this is all about. So I'm going to pull up that icon there, guys, a little bit larger here. Let's bring it up a little bit bigger for you. Of course, anybody should feel free to freeze and examine these icons. Now, I've borrowed the image on the left off the internet. Gratitude to the people who created these original images. It's a little bit small there, guys, but very simply, this is a pyramid system. And if you're wondering, for example, where you are, and you're one of these peasants and minions and ne'er-do-wells groveling around underneath the pyramid, we are the ones who fund all this. Can you see there on the right all the money symbols with where the money is going up the scale? At the very top is the International Bank of Settlements, I think it's called. It's a little bit small for me to make it out at this distance, but I hope you can see it better than me. And the puppet master over there on the left, all the members of the clergy. These will be the senior members now of the clergy, because it's organizational, don't forget. All right. Then the CIA, the FBI, MI5, Mossad and whatever, all of these secret services, armies and everything, all in the employ, descending from the international central banks, the national central banks, down to these big corporations, and then a corporatocracy, I think it's what it's called then, all the, Pfizer and ExxonMobil, and then below them, this is super important that you understand this, guys, that it is below them and not above them that we find our governments. And this is the statement, the first great lie, that the governments work for the people. No, they do not. Their skill set is in convincing us that they do. And we have to understand this, because as people run for the local elections, and I'm hoping to God that some of these decent people do get in, because they are people of integrity and honesty. I also hope that they understand that the only motivation that anybody should be attempting to get elected is with the ultimate purpose of dismantling this utterly corrupt system, which tends to corrupt even most of the decent people that go in arguably for better motives. But most of the people who do get into politics, most of them are already compromised, as we'll see in a few minutes. Okay, now let's see. It says slide 9 next. Let's have a look. All right, 1 second. No, that's not the right one. 789. I think that, no, excuse me for a second, guys. That was a slight error. So we have to go back to slide 5 here, and we'll pull that up for us just to explain. This is possibly the most important thing to understand. Now, I know I've shown these slides before, guys. This also is in the Crisis Color Coup book. I'll change that icon now to back to Integrity Ireland for the moment. So let's bring this up a little bit larger. We'll spend just a minute or so looking at this, because I just want to establish, especially for those of you who haven't seen this before. Again, we're talking about bigger picture thinking here, okay? Bigger picture thinking. Let's pop myself up in the corner there. Bigger picture thinking, guys, all right? So what I'd like you to grasp, and of course we have to speak in generalizations, but if you understand that there are basically 3 types of people at the bottom there, okay? You have empaths who care about other people. You've got sociopaths, and psychopaths who basically do not care about other people except when they're profiting from that so-called care, if you know what I mean, okay? And then in the middle, you have the apaths, or the apathetic people. Now, take your time to look at this, because, again, I don't want to ramble on too much. But very simply, if you are a good and decent person, your objective should be in life to try and become someone that belongs in that box up on the top left, the actively good people. All right. Unfortunately, most of the people running the world at the moment belong in the grouping over on the far right at the top. Now, of course, there are occasional exceptions to the rule. For example, you'll notice here on the right-hand side, if you go down the list there, predators, exploiters, manipulators, thieves, fraudsters, deceivers, liars, bullies, abusers, and it's in descending order. The better educated they are and the better placed they are within the system, which is something else I should probably say, the better placed they are in the system, the more protection these actively evil people have. But it was interesting to hear Bobby Kennedy, who interestingly is running as an independent in America at the moment. And there was an opinion poll done. Now, of course, America is saddled with the Democratic Republican, the donkey and the elephant thing. And if you're not in one of those parties, you're just not going to become president. It's just not going to happen. Seems to be the case. But this poll, an opinion poll, basically proved that if people thought that he could actually manage the country, more people would vote for Bobby Kennedy. And one of the first things that caught my attention. Now, again, politics is a complicated field. I'm not going to make too many comments about the ins and outs and the different positions of people. But one of the things he said, which I have said as well, and bear in mind, I don't know if those of you who realize I ran twice in the national elections in Ireland, the first time as part of a group, which turned out itself to be compromised, sadly, but as an independent within a grouping of people. But the organizers had already chosen their own golden boy to win it was, I suppose, a competition selection thing. It was called the First Independent Mayo project in 2016. And I was leading the field and arguably could have been selected by the people of Mayo to run as an independent, which would have been a great honor and a privilege. And I think, I certainly wouldn't have gone unnoticed if I'd managed to get into the Dáil. But, it was the first foray for me. I had no money to back myself up. I didn't really know what was going on. And when that first one collapsed, I decided to run in the 2020 election. And on both occasions, guys, a substantial amount. The first time was 25%, and second time was 56% of my vote was surreptitiously removed before the proper counts. And it's been proven. I've done videos about this. I won't go into it all now. But again, it was people within the system in senior positions in the system that had a vested interest in trying to make us look ridiculous and to deny us access to the democratic process. And unfortunately, nobody in the Dáil seemed to be bothered by it. Just didn't care. We wrote to everyone, wrote a book about it and everything and so on and so forth. Anyway, back to the image here, guys. So the main points to notice are that this is a general model that I'm suggesting that helps people understand, oh, yeah, I can see myself here or there. Let's say you're the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company that deliberately deceives people into taking flawed medications, if there ever were such a thing were to happen, then you absolutely belong in the top box up in the top right-hand side. If you're a politician that is actively deceiving. Oh, yeah, I didn't get around to what Bobby Kennedy said. He said that if he were made president, the first thing he would do, and this is super important. I've got to make this point I was so pleased to hear someone speak like this, because this is exactly what I would do as well if I were elected to political office. In whatever department I was in, whatever control I had or influence, any public servant or office holder or official who lied to the public would immediately lose their job. On top of that, I'd pursue criminal complaints against them on behalf of the people and everything. But that's what Bobby Kennedy said. God bless you, Bobby. I do hope you do really well, if for no other reason, to raise the level of awareness of people that liars have to be removed from positions of public trust. That's the first. And once they lie, gone. All right. There are people out there who do not lie. And we'll get to that later on in the presentation when we talk about some of the candidates for the upcoming elections. So back to this there. So this is just a model, guys, okay? This sort of gives you this sense that, oh yeah, you've got the bad guys on one side, you've got the good guys on the other, and you've got all of these apathetic people in the middle, you know, the people who are unconcerned, who don't care and or can't care or are too damaged or, you know, or they're incapable really of caring because they're in such menial labor parts of the workforce or whatever, you know, they just, and both the good guys and the bad guys are sort of trying to control that that dynamic and that demographic in the middle. The sad reality, however, the next slide is this is actually how the world really is. And yeah, let's see, I'll leave myself in the corner there just so you can see, guys. So at the top is the main thing I want you to see at the top there. The control of global institutions, capitalism, communism, banks, nation states, the media, education, health, justice and law, energy, food, science, and the so-called professions are now all controlled by actively evil people. And they're encroaching on the rest of us. They've already captured all the apaths. That these are all the people who just go, oh, shrug their shoulder, ah, sure, what can you do? Well, I didn't know any better. I was just doing as I was told. I was just listening to the authorities. Yeah. Where are we? I keep trying to bring myself back up. We were listening to the authorities. I was just doing as I was told. These are the apathetic people, the people who are unaware. Now, again, not being too judgmental because all of us have been conditioned to be basically unaware. And it's hard to blame, just like you can't blame an innocent child for the circumstances they're brought up in, you know, and for the things they're learning from the environment. At what point do we stop, making allowances for people? Well, I think in living in a world today where we have the internet, where we have so much access to information, and where all of this evil, especially since the COVID phenomenon, we'll call it, okay, since that was rolled out on the world stage, I personally believe there is no excuse for any intelligent person who has access to a computer and who can read and write not to know what is going on. And again, I'm sorry if that sounds a bit judgmental, but if you think you might be in that bracket, in the apaths, or one of the lesser well-educated, well-intentioned people who's been captured by the diabolicals now, as we call them, another phrase that's coming out into common use, I'm glad to say, along with the great lie, then please just, forgive yourself and start learning, even if you've already succumbed to some of the diktats and the so-called directions of the authorities that we now know were intrinsically evil. Still, your life starts today. You change, you learn, you do things differently. Okay, guys? So that sadly is the way it is. And at the moment, what we have to do is now increase. We have to fight back against those, let's call them those arrows in the top left, if you like, which is the encroaching evil, systemic global evil. It wasn't always like this, guys. To a certain extent it was, fallen human nature, if you like, if you want to call it. Fallen human nature has always exercised, the worst aspects of human nature, and it's usually on the masculine side of things, power, greed, force, violence, war, ambition, dominance through physical force and all that. All of these things, they're being played out now by these people in these institutions, okay? Excuse me. So let's see, 5 and 6. So we've done 5 and 6. Now we're going to bump up to another slide, guys. Please give me just a second. I just have to do a little bit of, here we go. Right then, what's this one? Right, great lie number 3. Never mind about 2. I'll be doing this larger presentation another time. Great lie number 3, that public servants serve the public. Yeah, I know. The lie is right there in the actual phrase. They're not public servants at all. They're there to serve the system whilst pretending to be public servants. The whole system is set up ostensibly to serve the public, but it doesn't, guys. It serves itself. And just as a little commentary, I see we're already, it's amazing how quickly we get through these. So here we are. Let's just pull this up. This is just as an example, guys, here in Ireland, okay? 6 civil servants who attended Foreign Affairs Party, this was during the lockdowns, were promoted to top roles. So even while the government was pretending to be horrified and, oh my Lord, these naughty, naughty people, you know, having champagne parties while we've told the public to be isolated and can't socialize in groups of more than 2.5 and all that sort of stuff. Social distancing, masks and all this. And these guys were partying. Yeah. And what happens? Are any of them really sanctioned? Really? Did anyone say to them, oh, your promotion is coming up here, Fred, but you know what? You displayed a serious lack of good judgment, and you've insulted the public. You violated the same rules we were asking the public to comply with. But guess what? We're going to promote you, and we're going to give you a nice fat pay rise as well. And on that subject of a fat pay rise, I just want you to, again, guys, the civil servants, right? Civil and public servants, guys, are to a large extent what is known as the deep state. These are the faceless bureaucrats. These often faceless bureaucrats, many of whom are getting paid far in excess of what the government leaders are being paid. Now, why would that be the case? We're all led to believe that the Taoiseach, you know, the presidents, the prime ministers, they're all in charge, aren't they? And they're telling everyone what to do in the top-down pyramid. Then you find out, no, not at all. You've got people like this Mr. Robert Watt, for example, who is on a salary of approaching 300,000 and got a pay rise of 81,000 in 1 year. What on earth? I think he's the Department of Justice, isn't he? I think so. I'm not 100% sure. But again, I'm just making a point, guys. Just get this in your head, especially as we go into these elections. Think about what's happening. Think about all of these people who are aspiring to make a change by getting into politics. Ask yourselves, guys, are you going to be able to achieve anything whilst you have people who are unsackable? They're protected by the rules, the regulations. The system has put all these protections in place so that effectively people like Mr. Watt will be telling you what to do, even if you're the Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, or dare I say it, the President. Doesn't matter. These are the people, and many of them stay out of the limelight. You never realize, but they in turn answer to their puppet masters, who are not our government officials. They're the people I showed you earlier at the tops of those pyramids. Okay. Let's see, where are we? Slide 13. 1 second, guys. 15. Number 5, that political parties are not autocratic and self-serving. Well, what's the problem with this? What's wrong with being autocratic? Well, again, for those people who may not understand these concepts, we're all told we live in democracies, aren't we? Yeah. And democracies, in a democracy, we choose a representative who represents the people. But that's not actually what's happening. What happens when you think about it, right? The mainstream political parties in particular, this is what I'm talking about, okay? Let's say Fine Gael. So you're a Fine Gael candidate, you come to the doorstep, I promise you the world, fix the roads, do all this sort of stuff, and I'm going to be a person of integrity. And you know what? I might actually believe myself to be a person of integrity at the point that I'm talking to people on the doorstep. The trouble is, as soon as I get elected and I walk into the Dáil chambers, the party whip is going to tell me what I can and can't do, regardless of what is right and wrong, regardless of the promises I've made, regardless of my own personal integrity, which I must now surrender to the diktats of the party, which is an organization, a pyramid, an institution, okay? I must surrender my integrity in order to continue to get their support, mainly their financial support. Otherwise, if the party whip goes against you, you can't associate any longer as a party member and all that stuff. All right, these are just facts, guys. We need to think about it. So, is that democracy? Well, of course, the answer is no. It isn't. Let's see, 15 says 16. Let's go to it. And here, yes. Now, this slide here, guys, it's a little bit complicated, but again, take your time, freeze it, have a look at it. Here, I'll take my little face out of it for a second. If you need to freeze it, do so. do a snapshot, take some time, look at it later. The diagrams I'm using, you're probably wondering why all the red and the blue and all that. That's actually to do with the universal principle, which I just pull up here on the top right there for a minute. This is the originating universal principle. It's a term I'm using to explain to people an original concept from which all of these other sub-context understandings are taken. And it's all to do with the deity. It's all to do with individual personal sovereignty, with our connection with the divine or with the almighty or with the source or whatever you want to name it, and how we manifest that in our lives. And one of the ways we do not manifest it in our lives, guys, is through autocracies. Okay, what are autocracies? Let's have a quick look. Well, here, top left, autocratic systems are tyrannies, dictatorships, fascism, despotism, authoritarianism, communism, totalitarianism, imperialism, colonialism, monarchism, government departments, believe it or not, and corporate structures. They are all autocratic systems, guys. No matter what they tell you otherwise, they can say, oh, look at North Korea. He's a right little tyrant and a right dictator. And you go, yes, he is. And apparently tonight he sent... it's sort of funny, you know, balloons possibly full of excrement into South Korea that just opened from the skies. You know, well, you know, metaphorically speaking, the same thing is happening to us on a daily basis by our governments, except it's not, you know, it doesn't come across over our, but we are being pooped upon, royally pooped upon on a daily basis and on a massive scale, guys, believe it or not, okay? So the model I've drawn there on the right, guys, collaborative systems versus autocratic. What's the difference? Well, collaborative systems, for example, are support things like individual freedom, self-rule, self-governance, self-determination, autonomy, independence, sovereignty, true anarchy. Now, don't worry about that word, guys. Research it, please, and you'll understand what it means. It actually means all of these things that I'm saying at the moment, but it's gotten itself a bad label because usually the governments, when they roll out the police, say, we got to roll out the police and beat up all the public who are demonstrating. Otherwise, there'll be anarchy. As if anarchy itself, the original true anarchy, is a bad thing. Trust me, guys, please look it up. I won't bother explaining it all here. Just look it up for yourself and you'll understand why. In an original model of the original principle on the top right, in an original world, certainly in a Garden of Eden type world, where we're connected with the divine and we were all basically operating out of a good concept, which you see there in the center, concept, plan, action, good concept, humane values and all that, right? Collaborative ideas, this is how it works, versus evil concepts over on the left, which very often, unfortunately, are directly associated with greed and money and so on and so forth. Okay, so democracy, this is true democracy, as some wit once said, yes, we should try it sometime, you know. Moral consensus, shared human values, teams, clubs, and small local associations. They could all come into that heading of collaborative systems. That's why centralized government is not healthy, guys, and it does not foster the empowerment of the individual or the growth of your conscience and your soul. It's as simple as that, guys. Do you want a soul or don't you? Well, if you don't want a soul, join these hierarchical, authoritarian, autocratic systems and sell your soul to them. That's what they're asking you to do, yeah? If you do want a soul, start thinking outside of the box and start thinking how we could have a network of collaborative systems instead of the centralized government attitude, and instead of these despotic, demonic, diabolical pyramids that draw and attract the very worst amongst us. As I showed you in the earlier slide, the sociopaths and the psychopaths are drawn to these models of operation. And even people who innocently work within them, believe it or not, whether they know it or not, are being trained and conditioned to become sociopaths if they're not a sociopath already. Please think about it, guys. Please, 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 especially those of you that run for politics, okay? This is 16, right? Well, I'm now going to jump a few more slides. I don't really know what's coming up until I hit it, guys. I chose them earlier. 22. Another great lie, number 8, that we have the rule of law. Now, I've put this in here particularly, guys, to draw attention to, again, the rule of law, you see, is supposed to be incumbent on any nations that want to join, for example, the European Union. Now, I've proven in the book I wrote, Criminality in the Irish Courts, that we don't have the rule of law in Ireland. And here's yet another proof, which I hope is going to shock and surprise a lot of you. Now, the book on the left, In Hot Pursuit of Lawful Justice During 99 Years of Illegal Irish Statutory Courts, was written by Pat Clohessy, a colleague of mine, a decent man who suffered the loss of his mother. She had been basically kidnapped by the state under the Wards of Court Act and administered medications against her will, against Pat's will. He was her power of attorney, but he lost that because the state came in and took over. And here on the right, guys, and I'll bring up the Integrity Ireland. Actually, there's the book on the top right. Just pop it in there, see if it'll pop up for me. No, it doesn't seem to want to. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. Criminality in the Irish Courts and the Absence of the Rule of Law. I'll pop that out again. So, excuse me. This seal you see here is the Executive Council seal. I'll keep this relatively simple because if you go into Pat's webpage or go and look at the book on Amazon where you can purchase it, excuse me, it's a substantial book. It has all of the official documents in it. Very simply, Pat and his colleague Andrew McHolst, between them, in doing research while they were trying to help litigants in the courts, lay litigants who are the subject of all manner of outrageous abuses of a power and authority and the law in our Irish courts. And they were searching for documents, and they discovered that the Irish courts have never been properly established. Now, I won't go into it all, guys, because it's in the book and it's in all the paperwork. Not only were they never properly established, but this is one of the proofs that they were never properly established, because they affixed the seal, which is by their rules necessary for any order to issue out of the Dáil. It has to have the seal on it. They affixed this seal to these to orders, alleged orders, years after they had been issued, because Andrew and Pat were able to find out that the seal was only made in, I think it was 1926, and they've got the documents to prove it. However, it appears on documents that were supposedly... So the government was forging documents in order to legitimize things after the fact. On top of that, there's this letter here. And again, I'll pull it up briefly, guys. I'm not going to read it all for you. Again, I'd ask you, please, to freeze the screen and read through the whole letter. But that's the original on the left, typewritten. And this is a selection from it. And it's basically one of the the Attorney General at the time, I believe, writing to another colleague in government saying, oops, that we've done a really big stupid boo-boo here, but if we cover this up carefully, we'll avoid the embarrassment. And it's unlikely that anybody's ever going to do what Pat and Andrew did and go in and ask the courts to legitimize this order. Now, the problem they've had is that they've used this, they've gone in and challenged the courts now on a number of occasions and said, until the proper order with the right stamp and seal on it is produced, the Irish courts have no legitimacy whatsoever. No legitimacy under the law, which is the thing that they tell us is the absolute governing principle under which they operate. They're a bunch of liars. They know that they're a bunch of liars and fraudsters, and that's partly how they can get away with doing so many outrageous, ridiculous things, because, frankly, according to their legal rules, none of them have any jurisdiction. None of the judges have any right to do anything. What we should do is wipe the slate clean and start a new system with a judiciary properly appointed or elected by the people, as opposed to being handpicked by the government, which is against the first principle of the Bangalore principles. Excuse me. There's a couple more here on the same topic. This is Pat here on the left. There's the book. This is Andrew put up this little witty post on Facebook. I wonder if they ever fixed their fraudulent statutory court system, and that's in 100 years from now. Yeah, because it's been going on already for 100 years, guys. You've got to, 23, 24, 300 years from now, sorry. So that's Pat on the top left, brave man, man of integrity, and he's done this work not for himself, but for you, although like myself and others of similar ilk who have been fighting this battle with the establishment for so long, we're driven by an impulse to inform the public about the way that we're all being horrifically and ridiculously taken advantage of. Okay, I've got this one in here. This is number 26, that fascism has been defeated. I just want to make a point here, guys. We all think that democracy replaced fascism, but that's not to understand actually what fascism is. To give a dictionary quote, okay, dictionary quote here, let's pull it up. Fascism is a political philosophy, a movement or a regime such as that of the fascisti, which is the Italian, it's the sticks, the fascisti, that's the sticks wrapped with the arrows, or sticks wrapped with, showing that it's unbreakable in unity and all that. You know, anyway, it's the symbol of the Roman Empire and all that. It exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and local and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. While I would, and secondly, a tendency towards or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control. Well, guys, you know, and again, I don't think it's an unrealistic comparison to say that that's exactly what the globalists intend to bring about. It's that they are going to be dictators in charge, and the individual's rights and privileges and fundamental, you know, human rights and everything, they're all going to go out the window. As a matter of fact, if you're inconvenient to them, you know, you'll be disposed of in one way or the other. It's statism is a good substitute for fascism, in a word, for those who are not political students like myself. Yeah, I got 28 as well. And an example, for example, just happening now, a current example. This is what's going on in Georgia. Now, if you know, in Georgia, the government proposed a bill to bring in a law that if you had any sort of association with foreign influence, you had to declare it and whatever, right? Whatever. Okay. Now, the people have absolutely made it clear that they don't want this law, right? I mean, they've been rioting and canvassing and things. Then the president, God bless her, the president of Georgia, unlike our Michael D. Higgins, had the balls, no offense, Mrs. Whatever your name is, you know, but she had the metaphorical balls. She had the courage to veto the bill. So she deployed her statutory power as the president of Georgia to veto this bill, even though the government tried to pass it. She said, no, I'm vetoing it. And she has the power of veto. She has that power. So what's happened? The government's just ignored her. They've ignored the people, they've ignored the president, and they've gone ahead and implemented a law that the people are, it looks like 90% against it, maybe, I mean, huge percentage of the Georgian population. That should tell us something. Yeah, that's over in Georgia. But they're doing the same thing here. They're just doing it a bit more surreptitiously. You know, it's done by tricks and it's done by deceptions. It's done by disappearing people's votes when it looks like they're going to succeed against the established parties. It's done by bringing in voting machines in America that are pre-programmed to produce a required result. It's incredible, guys, what they're getting away with, you know, the globalists. Where are we now? That's 28. Okay, we jump again, guys. We're getting there. We're getting there, guys. So today, and it looks like we're going to be in time as well. The next one is 34. Which one's this? Another great lie, that structural hierarchies are healthy and necessary, which is one of the arguments I'm trying to press out there and get people. The more we repeat it, the more people will start thinking about this. You know, structural hierarchies, large organizations with an autocratic boss at the top telling everyone else what to do, with the workers and the administrators and everybody required to surrender their conscience, their personal sense of integrity in order for their wage packet at the end of the week. I was just doing as I was told, etc., etc. And this is to bring it up a little bit larger for you. Excuse me, guys. Across the top, authoritarian systems, again, nation states, governments, the media, the health systems, education, banks and finances, justice and law, military, industrial complex, sorry, the military-industrial complex, including the military, of course, which is war for profit, energy, food, science, organized crime, and the so-called professions. There we go again, guys. They're all hierarchical associations. Individuals within these organizations may think that they're operating relatively independently, but ultimately they're subject to the diktats of whoever's above them. Now, there's an inverse. I'm going to bring up the, what's name again? There, top right, there's the proper original principle. That's the feminine over the masculine, surrounded by the divine. Over here on the left, you see the opposite. You've got the masculine dominating the feminine, in the yin-yang type symbol there, surrounded by the absence of the divine, or darkness, blackness, you know, representing the absence of light and truth and all that sort of stuff. So inhumane values on the left. Again, guys, I'll let you work your way through this, freeze it. But amoral urges and drives are the concept. They're inhumane values, and they will produce an evil outcome. It's as simple as that. And the way you do it is through these hierarchies, through these diabolical structures. They have to be structured this way. And that's not democratic, as I showed you in the slide earlier, guys. These are not collaborative associations. They are dictatorial, autocratic systems that can only produce evil outcomes because... And you'd say, oh, what about the churches and what about the charities? I'm telling you guys, this, believe it or not, this applies to any large organization or institution. And the term large at the moment, I believe to be about 70 people. Any more than 70 people, and structures and methodologies and administrators have to be brought in to manage the structure, because it becomes too big to manage. You know, if you have someone, let's say like Jesus, right? So you could say, and we're arguing like he's the perfect man. And the one interesting thing about Jesus is how many organizations was he a CEO of? Huh? How many institutions did he belong to? Do you remember the quote? You know, the son of man doesn't even have a place to lay his head, he said. Yeah. How many of these organizations and institutions was he a party of? A party to? Did he belong to, or he was the head of? None of them. You know, and don't say he was the head of Christianity, because if you say that, you don't know your church history. He was the figurehead who prompted the rise of Christianity. But as Christianity grew from a local group of believers into an institution, i.e. the Roman Catholic Church, for example, eventually, you know, as it grew into institution, and with all of its bishops, and then bit by bit, people embedded in that institution were required to protect the institution more than the ethics, the principles, and the holy morals that gave birth to it in the first place. Please think about it, guys. It's a really poignant and interesting point. I'll just bring it up again to give you a moment to freeze it. On the right-hand side, top-down, power and or profit-driven, masculine-dominated ethos, sociopathic, large, directive, suppressive, exploitative, uniformed, controlling, system comes first. In other words, no moral conscience. All right, the system comes first. It has no conscience. If you're going through life without a conscience, guys, as I've said in another presentation, you are arguably functioning as a beast, because spirit, mind, body, if the spirit equates the soul or the conscience, remove that, all you are is a mind and a body, no different to a cow in the field, guys. That's where the proverbial sense of the beast, 2/3 of the person, 66.6%. I do presentations on this. I think it's really important that everybody starts to understand. You've got to nurture your conscience, even at the expense of your wage packet. You've got to do it, guys. There other opportunities will arrive if you have the courage of your convictions. Okay. Again, as Jesus said, why do you worry? Why do you labor? He said. Imagine that. Why do you labor? Why do you work? He said, God in heaven who cares for his children. He said, well, won't he? He knows, he counts every hair on your head. Won't he look after you? You know, interesting, isn't it? Where's our real faith, guys? Huh? So 35. One more here before we go to our political friends. So here's the the comparison slide again, guys. That slide you've just seen on the left Same thing, right? That's exactly the same principles that I've just talked about. And then on the right-hand side, here's these collaborative systems that we spoke about a few minutes earlier. If the motivation are humane values, that's what the little golden heart there is supposed to represent. Humane values. If they are at the heart of the concept, if that is what we base our small collaborations around, not profit, not exploitation, not suppression, not dominance, not violence, but collaborative cooperation, through mutual respect and genuine concern for the welfare of others. If that's our motivating concept, then the outcome will be good. All right. And now we're going to move on to our local politicians, guys. We've got the last 15 minutes or so. If so, now we're going to feature, let's go all the way up to, yeah, we're going to go right. All right, here we go. Number 84. Yes. So back to our Integrity Ireland logo, or maybe even the Crisis Cull or book, Colour Coup book, because it does contain some unpleasant truths. This is, you know, quite a well-known cartoon now, guys, to how everybody tends to seek that which is comfortable, that is which is most palatable, that which already suits their paradigm, their understanding of life. And unpleasant, because usually unpleasant truths require us to accept, well, what sort of a person am I if I don't value the truth? Unpleasant or not. If it's unpleasant, all it means is that I've got to shift my perspective to accommodate it, because I need to be an agent of truth. Yeah, that's why the desk is empty. Obviously, you know, I don't overplay it. So here we go. What's the next slide? We're talking now about yes, authoritarian systems again. We've already really hammered this out, guys. So I can move on from that one. And here we go, guys. Now, who are these handsome young men? Well, as you can see, guys, on the both of these gentlemen, I'm proud to say, are associates of mine, and I'd like to call them friends. I certainly trust them. They wouldn't be up here on an Integrity Ireland video or a Stephen Manning video if I didn't trust them, okay? The same goes for some of the other people we're going to see in a moment, even though I haven't physically met some of them. But these now we've got local elections and European elections, guys, happening in the next week. All right. I'll say this straight away. The local elections are happening on a Friday. I'm suspicious about that, guys, purely because I've seen what they're now. The guy responsible for disappearing votes before, Fintan Murphy, has since retired. Instead of being jailed, he was the guy who, I don't have his picture with me here now, but he was the guy who submitted fraudulent papers in the Strokestown trial that ended up, you know, with that debacle out in Strokestown, where you know, you had mercenaries come down from the north with armed mercenaries from the north, employed by our Irish government and the banks, facilitated by Fintan Murphy, the county registrar, and the sheriff, you know, and it ended up with, you know, and then people went in and took back repossession of the house, and there was, you know, a court case over it, and 3 men are in jail for 15 years over it, you know. It's mind-boggling. But part of the reason they're in jail is because this Fintan Murphy guy, who disappeared votes when I ran for election last time, actively went in and forged documents out of in his role as the registrar of the circuit court. He forged documents, and it was never dealt with by the court. I mean, it's shocking, it's appalling. But this is the system we have to change, guys. And we can't just sort of shift the system over and just put a load of news people in, because part of the problem, it's not just the people, it's not just the system itself, it's the way that the system corrupts the people that participate in it. Okay, so here we are. We have the County Mayo local elections. Stephen Kerr in Castlebar, who's also the owner of the Irish Inquiry, a citizen journalist, absolutely honest individual, driven by the right impulses. This is so important, guys. The people who are going to feature here, driven by the right impulses, which is that they are shocked and appalled at the corruption, at all of the lies, at the deception, at the way that the Irish people are being hoodwinked and deceived on a daily basis. And they're driven by a need and an urge to try to do something. And unfortunately, in our current system, there's not much you can do except try to run for office and try and get into a position of some influence and start making a difference. I personally hope that my friends and colleagues who are running are doing so with the overarching understanding that their reason for trying to get the attention of the public and some political power is to effect change, which is exactly what they're declaring. Joe there on the right, a lot of people know Joe. He's going around Ballina now, he's canvassing. Good luck to you, Joe. I sincerely hope you do really well. You've suffered enough, Joe. Joe has been imprisoned, he's been persecuted, he's had businesses shut down, he's been physically attacked and assaulted, he's had guards crawling around in the grass outside his bedroom at night out in the rural areas in the backwaters of Ballina. He's been treated absolutely terribly, but throughout it all, isn't it great to say that he's maintained his own integrity and has never backed down. They see the courage is integrity and courage go hand in hand, guys. You can't have one without the other, because living in a world where the diabolicals prevail and where lies and deceptions and dishonesty gets rewarded, if you have integrity, you're going to run into trouble. That's when the courage kicks in, because you have to then decide, I'm going to hold my ground, even if they come after me, even if they throw me in jail. Okay. John Waters, again, a lot of people will know John too, a journalist, a journalist, a very astute and well-informed social thinker, and an honest man. And I'm proud to say that John authored a chapter in the Crisis Colour Coup book as well, where he articulates very clearly some of the dangers of, let's just call it, the medical directions that we were being given by the system, the establishment. John too has put his neck on the line. He's also experienced the frustration that it took me nearly 15 years to properly understand, that we don't have law. We don't have the rule of law. We've got politically appointed, already corrupt legal professionals, so-called professionals, being appointed as judges precisely because they're corrupt and because they'll protect the system. It doesn't function, guys. It might as well be completely thrown out. So here I'm urging people, you see John's name come up, give him your preference, your number one preference. He's a good man, he's an honest man, and deserves your support. Una McGurk, also a candidate for the European elections. Now, Una, I haven't met personally, but I've seen some of her presentations online. The fact that this lady is a barrister is hugely impressive. The reason I'm very impressed is because any barrister, there's two or three, there's other barrister solicitors who've had the courage to speak out. The first thing that happens to them is that they get penalized internally through whatever mechanisms the government has available to them to do so. Okay, and so I admire her greatly. She has spoken out bravely and honestly against, for example, the hate speech crimes, against the WHO treaty, which will basically hand over your sovereignty to an outside unelected agency, and they will dictate to our governments what we then have to do, or else the government will deploy the police and the army and the courts against us to force us to do it. It's ridiculous, guys. The law has become a tool of the wicked. It's not what it was ever originally designed to be, and arguably we need to get to a position where we don't need all these laws in order to live happy, fruitful, productive lives. Suzanne Delaney is also running in Dublin. I believe it's the local elections, but again, you'll see there's the Irish Inquiry logo. So Suzanne works closely with Steve Kerr. And I saw there's a video up there online where she bumps into Roderick O'Gorman. That, I can't. I've got to maintain my own dignity, but try and use your imagination. All of the worst and most derogatory expletives possible for that individual that I could use. But Suzanne caught him on the street, tried to talk to him, and he he smirkly smugs. Sorry, bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? He smugly smirks at her as eventually, and he speeds up his walking. So she's literally having to try and run to keep up with him. And he smirks and looks over his shoulder at her without answering a single question. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Encouraging foreign nationals to come to Ireland whilst denying on the record that they're doing it. And we've got the paperwork to prove it. We've got the documents in various different languages, encouraging people, promising them a home within 4 months if they come to Ireland, recruiting from Pakistan for the guards and everything. And again, not that there's anything intrinsically wrong with that, but in the climate and the culture, and whilst there's over 18% now of the population are immigrants, largely undocumented, largely unvetted, and many of whom are contributing to a rising crime rate, we've got to ask what the hell is going on, okay? Here's Dermot O'Codla. I hope I'm saying it properly, Dermot. My apologies. I tend not to deal in second names too often, and I know you love your Irish, your Gaelic, But here's Dermot. Now, he's running down in Cork. On the left-hand side, you see, I'll take myself out of this for a minute. You see the Corruption Awareness Ireland, guys. Let me direct you to that. That's an initiative run by another colleague, Ken. Ken Donnelly. So Ken and Dermot work closely together. Ken usually works the camera. But again, another courageous, honest, determined, outspoken person of integrity. And again, there's one of the articles, top left, the drug cartels are embedded with senior politicians and Gardaí. Yes, brave enough to cover stuff like that. Another person who deserves your vote. Now, in the middle there, this is Dolores Webster, otherwise known as Dee. And she looks very tall there on the top of the mountain. I can tell you she's not, okay? But again, somebody I've come to get to know over the last few years, and I admire her courage, her tenacity, her forthrightness, her willingness to learn, and her willingness to change as she learns. So Dee started out just as a normal sort of Dublin housewife, I suppose I could say. All right. She has been also vilified and attacked by the system, by the guards. They've tried to put her in jail. She's been thrown through the courts. And as it says there, got no voice. Dee has a voice. They will all hear. She's a loud lady. And again, I'm suggesting that you give her your number one. And then finally, the last slide today, guys. And unfortunately, that's... that does that sometimes. This is on, I've literally got about 2 minutes to conclude here, guys. On Friday, May the 31st, next Friday, I'm being interviewed again by Jessie Hall from Canada. These interviews, they can go on a wee bit, but hopefully you find them interesting. And the title that we'll be presenting is Evil Industrialized equals humanity disenfranchised, otherwise also the great lie and what's going on. So I'll leave it at that, guys. And friends, thank you again for your attention. If you do want to support us, see if I've got time to run this little banner under here. Yes, this little banner that's running across the screen there. Please go to crisiscolorcoup.com, and if you want to help us, go ahead and do so, guys. The best way you can help us is buy the Crisis Color Coup book. And if anybody does want me to come and do a presentation about any of these materials, I am available. Please email Truth Matters. There you are at the bottom. And with that, guys, I say thank you for your time and attention. God bless everyone, and let's support these worthy candidates. Goodbye for now. I'll give my thumbs up. Okay, or this one. Goodbye for now. God bless.